This is Rebel Mom Boss, the podcast for scrappy, rebellious moms who are making things happen while raising their babies. My name is Robyn Flynn, a scrappy, rebellious mom myself, and the founder and managing director of Robyn Flynn Media. I'm also a mom to a beautiful toddler named Peyton. We do things a little bit differently here, so buckle up and welcome to the rebellion. If you're an entrepreneur, chances are you are also doing your own marketing. And depending on your interests, your aptitude, it can either be super fun and an exciting part of running your own business, or it can start to feel like a chore. Our guest this week is Meg O'Neill. Meg specializes in helping entrepreneurs market themselves intuitively in a way that feels both authentic to themselves and to their clients. She's also the co-host of the Intuitive Marketing Podcast, where she talks about all things advertising with both heart and soul. And she joins us now. Hi, Meg. Welcome to the Rebellion.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, me too. I absolutely love chatting about marketing because I kind of stumbled into this industry. I worked in broadcast radio. Like I was a producer, a journalist for years and years. And then, you have a baby and your whole world changes and you figure out something else. And I realized, hey, I've been promoting radio segments, radio guests, clips from shows on social media forever. I bet there's some transferable skills there. Turns out there are. And that's sort of how I fell into it. So for me, it still feels very new, very fun. But a lot of women that I've spoken to who are running businesses, like they're tattoo artists, they run a bakery, they find social media has become a chore. And it's something that they just can't keep up with. Is this something that you're hearing from a lot of people as well, that it's just not fun anymore?
All of the time. I hear it all of the time because so many of these people got into their craft because they are experts at what they do, not to become content creators, right? So it's like the necessary evil to also learn content creation in order to market your business. But what I like to do with people is teach them to get to the point where at least it doesn't feel like it's like a horrible chore. Like I want them to be like, I feel like I can do this in a creative way. I can make this my own a little bit and have fun with it. And I think that that's what helps me stand out from just hiring a social media marketing firm. I actually see that creating content can be like a healing avenue as well, and help people really be visible and own their expertise in a way that they might not have thought or felt confident enough to do before.
I think intuitive anything is super important, because I think so often as just human beings, we do what we think we're supposed to instead of what feels right, right? And that happens with social media, I think, because there's so many experts out there that say, you got to post twice a day, you got to be in your stories, reels are dead. Like there's all this advice coming at you that it's impossible to keep up with, and not all of it is going to make sense for you, right? And I think that's something I really wanted to chat about with you, is figuring out what makes sense for you and your brand, because we can't all be the next Duolingo, right?
No,
like, they're very good at what they do on social media, but that's not going to make sense for a mom who runs a bakery.
Right, exactly. So I think ultimately what it comes down to, if you could get to a place where it feels fun for you, you're going to be naturally magnetic. Right? If somebody comes on, even if they have a messy background or they don't have the great lighting, if they show up and they're like, this cake is the best cake you're ever going to have in your life, and they like, you can feel their energy behind it, or they tell you the story about how that cake came to be or how their bakery came to be, you're going to be invested. That's why on TikTok we see so many people going viral against the grain of what we were taught for Instagram, right? It's a way more organic platform. You could be laying in bed with your hair a mess, just telling a story, and have, 1 million views on something because it's captivating, because you're excited about it, because you want to connect. So that's what I think. I'm a millennial. Are you a millennial?
I am.
So many of us millennials have been taught in, like, you have to look aesthetic. It has to be a certain way on Instagram. And I really encourage my clients to go against the grain. So if you come to me with an idea and you're like, this feels good to me, this is what I like to do, this is how I like to show up, let's double down there. Sales happened way before social media ever came to be, right? Like you could go around and knock on doors if you want. You can do marketing however you see fit, like whatever feels good to you. So if we can tap into that place and double down there, you're going to have success. And ultimately, in the end, what it really comes down to is consistency. if you just keep showing up, you're going to have success. Whether it's just because you're practicing, you're flexing that muscle, you're leaning into it more, you're feeling more magnetic, whatever it might be, you will see that connection happen.
I know what I think about this, but I'm curious to know what you think about it. Does it make sense to be on every single social media platform? Like, do you need to have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Red Note, Lemonade, Pinterest? Like, do you
Never.
need to be on absolutely everything?
No. And as a social media expert, I'm not. I have said no to Red Note. I have said no to Blue Sky. I'm like, I just can't. I have 3 kids. I have a business. I have all of these things. I know where my people are and where I feel comfortable. I always want to push my edges. So now I try to put more time into TikTok. It's not naturally where I spend most of my time. So that's what I'll encourage people to do. First thing is, when you start a business, get on one platform. And then secondly, always start an email list. Like, even though social media is like super important, get those people to your email list. Then eventually, when you've been flexing that muscle, when it feels more comfortable, see what you can switch to. Or can you use repurpose.io? Can you put some different practices in place that are going to help you be omnipresent without having to actually show up everywhere?
Do you think it's possible to have a decent social media presence without, being a content creator and being in videos talking yourself? Because I have a lot of clients who say, I want to have thousands and thousands of followers, but I don't want to be on camera. What would you say?
I think it is possible. I don't think it's the norm. And I also would love to go deeper there and say, okay, so you want all of these followers, but you don't want to be on camera. Why then? Why do you want the followers? What's the ultimate, like, what's the seed in there? I think a lot of us just have a lot of fear and wounding around visibility. And so we have this desire to be seen. We have this desire to be seen for our expertise and whatever it is that we do share, but we're scared. So, and if that's not the case, you're like, no, I'm not scared. I just don't want to be on video. Well, who can be your ambassador then? Who can be that human who can show up on video sometimes to give something to connect with people? Because people are no longer just connecting with that really pretty packaging from skincare, or they need to know the story. They need to in order to engage. It's a lot harder to get people to engage now. You have to have somebody, sharing that story, that why, that mission.
Yeah, I saw this great post on LinkedIn this morning from a social media manager that I follow who said, people aren't going to social media to see stuff from brands. They're not going there to see ads. They want to see people. They want to see their friends. And that's the content that's going to perform. If anything, brands are intruders in the social media space. You need to find a way to make yourself their friend. Make yourself someone that they want to see. And you need to have a human for that, right?
Exactly. And you'll even see that I think some of the brands are even moving away from UGC and just doing more content creation from the aspect of like somebody who works within their company. So going to CVS to buy the product, or like it's becoming a lot more human focused. Even like the consumer is so smart now. So whereas UGC used to feel very organic and feel like, oh, this isn't an ad, we're too smart for that now. We know what you're doing. So it's like, what's the next iteration of that, and putting a human face on a brand?
I think something else that small businesses in particular struggle with social media is their resources, and the money is just limited when it comes to marketing. And unless a specific piece of content is going to drive sales for their business, they just don't see the point, which I think is a little bit short-sighted, right?
I do
because
too.
It's all about relationship building,
Right.
community building, and I think that's a long game at the end of the day, right? It's not, you can't look at an ROI per post. It has to be
Never.
a bigger sort of sample size than that, right?
Exactly. And I think that, again, the short-sightedness part of that is, are you going to be doing this in 5 years? Is your business going to be the same iteration in 5 years? So if that is, okay, great. But if not, like, you want a personal brand, and you cannot do that without having some kind of content created through your expertise, through your thought leadership. So if you own a business and you want to eventually do some speaking maybe, or you want to be a leader in a different way, like it's going to compound that, that time that you put in. So to say like, okay, did this post drive traffic? Maybe not, but did it build your thought leadership? Did somebody want to have a conversation with you after to hire you for some, so I think like you said, it's definitely the long game. And I think you have to think strategically about where it's going to take you years and years from now too.
Now, I'm super interested in this because you had like a 10-year sort of corporate marketing career
Hmm.
before you launched your own consulting business, which is very similar to my own path. I worked in radio for 10 years and then went, no, I'm going to start my own business. So I'm curious what inspired you to become an entrepreneur.
So the story that inspired me is that I have three children, and my oldest has special needs, and he fell out of a second story window when he was 5 years old, and he broke both of his feet. I had at that time when he was five, I had three children under 5 years old. He had gotten his diagnosis with autism at 22 months. So I had been, it had been a while, but I was working outside of the home like 30 hours a week, taking him to many different therapies. Also had a baby and a toddler. I was like drowning, definitely drowning. And I loved what I did. I was actually the director of marketing for a pre and postnatal wellness facility. So it worked very well within the time that I was in life. But I was also providing lactation support, and I was getting a little bit resentful of questions and stuff because I was like, and then I knew it's time to go. So I was still in that career, but then my son had his accident, and I was like, yep, I'm done. Like, I need to make something so flexible. Parents of children with special needs really need a lot of flexibility, and people don't understand what that looks like because he was getting about 25 hours of services within our house. So if I wasn't here, who was going to be here? I would have had to hire somebody. There were so many different things in play. So I quit my job and I said, I'm going to take a year and not do anything because I really needed to just make sure that whatever I did was going to fit with my lifestyle. And in that time, I became a yoga teacher. I became a Reiki master. I took a life coaching certificate. So I did a lot. And then I was like, I had women always asking me to go on walks. And my husband's like, this is so nice. You have all these friends, but like, how can you monetize this? And I was like, people are attracted to me for a reason, right? So that's where I kind of kicked off my coaching career. And then most of my clients started coming to me for marketing advice themselves too. So that's how it ultimately came to be.
Wow, I'm always just continuously inspired by working moms
Mm.
because, you do it when you're in it and you don't question it because what's the alternative, right?
Right.
But then when you pull back and like, I have friends who aren't moms
Hmm.
and they're just like, I, at the end of the day, don't have the patience or energy to make dinner for myself, let
Hmm.
alone, help a kid with homework, get them bathed, get them to bed, argue with them about eating enough vegetables. Like, she's like, I don't know where you find the energy. And I'm like, I don't know either. It just
Hmm.
sort of miraculously comes to be. So, you're describing working crazy hours full time, corporate. You have a child with special needs who's just had an accident. You have two young children, a toddler, a baby. Like, that's a lot. At any point, did you ever feel like, hey, I'm on the verge of burnout here? Like, something needs to change. And if so, what did you do? And if not, to what do you attribute that to?
I definitely felt fully in burnout. I actually had been doing some freelance writing for Motherly, the media company. My sister was one of their first writers, and I ended up doing some writing for them. And during that time, I had gone on anti-anxiety medicine, and I went on it with the hope of weaning off, like using it as a tool to help me get to a different place. And I did, and I ended up working with a holistic psychiatrist and weaned off, learned meditation. But during that time, I wrote an article for Motherly that ended up going somewhat viral on the fact of rage was my symptom of burnout. I also later found out I had ADHD and things like that. So it was the culmination of like being in sensory overload, being in burnout. It came out as rage, and I had never felt like that before. So I used that experience and wrote about it, and I ended up having so many other women reach out to me at a time where people weren't sharing as much about mental health. It was probably around 10 years ago now. And I had so many other women reach out to me, and I used that a little bit as a talking point because I knew that that was something that other women needed to hear about too.
Absolutely. I feel like we put so much pressure on ourselves
Yeah.
too as moms, right? For what we're supposed to do. And social media is partly to blame for that, right? Because we only share the best parts of our
Right.
lives. So we're seeing other people's best parts of their lives and we're not
Right.
seeing the meltdowns and, the quiet moments, or the days you didn't have time to shower, or the day
Right.
you gave your kid chicken nugget, whatever. We just don't see all of that. And I'm curious how you have navigated the pressures that come with being a mom, because you can't win, right? Whether you choose
Oh
to
yeah,
stay at
there's
home, whether you work in the home, outside the home, have kids, not have kids, it feels like there's just no winning for women.
I totally agree. And I think it comes back to intuition, to be honest. There was this one time I was taking my son to New York when we were on the ferry, and he was about, excuse me, 3 years old. And he was looking out on the side and he was flapping his hands. And he normally didn't have like behaviors like that. And in my head, I was like, I am not going to squash this. Like, it doesn't feel right to me to try to make him be somebody else. And in that, it gave me this experience of healing of, okay, this is how I'm going to intuitively parent. Everyone is telling me I should do this one certain therapy. Everyone's telling me that they shouldn't have a pacifier. All of these things. And I was like, I have to listen to myself here. And then over time, that's what I just continued to do. We bed shared for years and years and years. We did things that were against the grain in parenting, and that helped me thicken my skin and also just get to a point where I knew that if it didn't feel good in my body, if it didn't feel good in my gut, that I wasn't on the right track. And it helped me build that confidence throughout motherhood to feel like I'm not going to do it exactly like everybody else, and that's going to be okay. I mean, obviously we all doubt ourselves on the hard weeks and stuff. But ultimately that has really, really served me.
Yeah, I feel there's something really special about a woman's intuition,
Mm-hmm.
that it has this. I'm a very sort of magical person. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I really believe in magic, and I do feel like it is the magic of being a woman, is
Mm-hmm.
that intuition that we inherently have. And I also find that that has served me well in my parenting journey, is
Mm-hmm.
knowing what feels right and what doesn't, and when to ask questions or push harder. I mean, we hear these stories all the time, right? Of like moms who went to the doctor and they were ignored or
Mm-hmm.
told it was no big deal, and they pushed and fought and advocated for their children, and it turns out, yes, something is wrong and mom was
Mm-hmm.
right. Why do you think it is that, I don't know, I feel like society has almost made fun of women's
Mm-hmm.
intuition and made us feel like it's, oh, you're just being crazy, it's all in your head, relax, when in reality I feel like there's so much magic and power there.
It's the patriarchy. The patriarchy has programmed us to believe, because at a time, because women are so powerful, and we can do it without that explanation too. We don't have to explain why. And I think it's very accessible to all genders. But I think that it scares the world, and I think a woman fully standing in her confidence is very threatening to. And I think that's why so many of us have our own businesses too, because in the workplace people try to quiet that, and not in all situations, but I'm sure many of us have that experience of trying to be quieted for wanting to dare to like do something different. And so I really feel like the more of us that share how we can intuitively lead a business, the more that will change for the future, and just the more powerful we can become in a communal way, in a way that's going to uplift all of us.
It also makes me like, I'm so excited when I speak to, obviously I'm a little biased because for this podcast I speak to a ton of entrepreneurs who are women, but it also makes me a little bit sad that we've been advocating for change in the corporate world for so long, screaming from the rooftops, and nothing changed, or changed too slowly, shall we
Minimal,
say.
yeah.
And to the point where we just went, screw it. And we all just
Right.
left and started our own business. Like, I'm curious what the working world is going to look like, 10, 15, 20 years from now, when women are all running their own businesses because they
Hmm.
don't want to go work for places where, you're penalized for having children, really, especially if you're in America. Like, if you're in the US,
Yes.
my goodness, like the cost of childcare, no
And
maternity
so then.
leave, like it's so hard to be a woman and also work at the same time, but it doesn't have to be, and we prove that when we start our own businesses and find success, right?
Right. And hopefully I think of one of my friends who has a financial planning company and who has other women working for her. And that's going to be a huge shift that we see too. I also see people who are about 10 years younger than me. I'll be 42 next month. There is a shift happening. I think it was very slow for us, but it does seem like the mental load, everything is more dispersed in a way that wasn't in that 10 years, like that changed. So I am hopeful in that respect. And then I'm hopeful that, we'll all keep creating businesses that we can hire women, and we can create flexible work situations. And, my partner, she was just messaging me, her son is on spring break, and we were actually having this conversation of like, this partnership is so healing, because she will say to me that she has all of this stuff happening with him, and she's like, I'll just work tonight. And I'm like, yeah, work tonight, or don't work at all. Like, work, like, I don't care when you work, it doesn't matter. Like, we know that we're going to get it done. We're so mission driven. That's not the worry, right? The worry is that, are we spending enough time resting? Are we taking care of our family in the way that feels like good to us? Like, that's where we really have to focus, so that we can show up fully to the people that we serve.
Yeah, there's this great meme I saw this week that was like, okay, I'm going to take Saturday off to relax, but I wonder if I can relax more productively.
It's so true.
Right? Like, when I feel horrible if I haven't accomplished something before I relax.
Right, right.
Which is terrible, right? Like, anyway. You can find Meg O'Neill on her website at intuitivemarketingcollective.com. She offers personalized one-on-one coaching, custom web design services, all kinds of fabulous marketing tools for entrepreneurs. You can also follow her on Instagram at Meg O'Neill 10. Thank you so much for being here, Meg. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. This was great.
If you like what you heard today, make sure you follow and subscribe to Rebel Mom Boss with Robyn Flynn wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and make sure to leave a review, because that's how other moms will find the podcast too. Until next week.